Parshas Re'eh. We have to do that which is good and straight. Question is, in whose eyes? In whose eyes do we have to do that which is good and straight? Well, let's look at the verse. Perik Yud Beis, Pasuk Chavches, 12:28. Shamor v'shamata eis kol hadvorim ha'ela asher anochi mitzaveka. Observe and hear all these words that I command you. Lama'an yitav lecha ulevanecha acharecha, so that it may be good for you and for your children after you, ad olam, in perpetuity. Ki ta'aseh hatov v'hayashar b'nei Hashem Elokecha. When you do that which is good and straight in the eyes of Hashem, your God. Well, the question I asked didn't seem to be too complicated, did it? You have to do that which is good and straight in the eyes of God. One problem. Let's look at Rashi. What does Rashi say? Hatov, do that which is good, b'nei hashamayim, so far so good. V'hayashar, and that which is straight, b'nei adam, in the eyes of man. Whoa. Who said anything about man's perception in this verse? Well, Rashi did, but the verse doesn't say it. It says, Ki ta'aseh hatov hayashar b'nei Hashem Elokecha. When you do that which is good and straight in the eyes of the Lord your God, of Hashem your God. So where does man's perception come into this? The Maharal asks this question, and he says, we want to look at the difference between that which is tov and that which is yashar, that which is good and that which is straight. And there's nuance here and implication. The aspect of tov, good, is an intrinsic quality. It's something that is not necessarily perceptible by us, whether something is good or not, without, that is, the benefit of understanding the Torah. In other words, God tells us what's good. God tells us what's bad. The Torah is filled with do this, don't do that. And we understand, we deduce, that that which we are supposed to do is good, that which we are supposed to not do, which we are prohibited from doing, is bad. Okay. How about something which is yashar? Yashar means straight. What's straight? A line. A line is straight. How do I know it's straight? I look at it. I look at a line and I perceive that it is straight. Now, Rashi didn't come up with this on his own. He bases this on a medrash. It's quoted in the Sifri, quoted in the Alkut Shimoni. It's Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva came up with this. Rabbi Akiva says that tov means in the eyes of God, and yashar means in the eyes of man, even though it says yashar, hayashar, be'enei Hashem Elokecha, in the eyes of the Lord your God. And the Sifsei Chachamim, quoting the Divrei David, says that it makes sense because that which is straight in the eyes of man is straight in the eyes of God. So we really have two standards. And the Mefarshim are quite clear about this. Perhaps Reb Shimshon Raphael Hirsch is the clearest in his, most explicit in his declaration. But we are obligated to follow two standards. Number one, is our action inherently good? And number two, is it perceived to be good by others? Now, sometimes this can lead to a corruption. That is the emphasis on perception, the emphasis on making an impression. Sometimes people can act externally in a way that appears to be righteous. They can dress in ways that appear to be righteous. It's much easier to look righteous and to dress righteous than it is to actually be righteous. So if there's an undue emphasis on the perception of others, there could be a tendency towards hypocrisy. Now, the Gemara in Brachos talks about this with Rabbi Gamliel, who was notably insistent on his students being consistent, inside and outside. Tocho kabaro. That is, the perception of the impression that the student gave off had to be a genuine reflection of what was going on the inside. That apparently was a very high standard, because once he was replaced, the Gemara says that they had to add more benches to accommodate, in the Beis HaMedrash, to accommodate all the incoming students who presumably did not meet the standard, or at least didn't obviously, if you will, meet the standard. So there's a challenge of being consistent, but the challenge is to do the right thing, that which is inherently right, and also do it in a way that it is perceived by others to be straight. Now, sometimes we have rules such as maris ha'ayin or cheshad, which is we do things that may be proper, but we are prohibited from doing that which would give rise to the appearance of impropriety. Now, the Netziv looks at this verse and he expands the context of this understanding. And he says, the words that precede Ki taseh hatov v'hayashar b'nei Hashem Elokecha, when you do that which is good and straight in the eyes of the Lord your God. It says, L'ma'an yitav l'cha l'uvanecha acharecha ad olam, said it should be good for you and for your children after you who follow you. He says that there is a tendency in some people to comply with the letter of the law, but to be contentious, and in so doing, create ill will with others, even though they're doing exactly the right thing. Something comes to mind. A person has a regular seat in shul. Now, you're supposed to have a regular seat in shul. You're supposed to daven in the same place. You come in a little bit late to shul, and you find somebody sitting in your seat. What do? Should you say to this person, that's my seat, please move? Or do you say, you know what? I'll sit somewhere else. It's better not to make the other person feel uncomfortable than it is to sit in my regular seat. And al pidin, even if you're within the Dalet Amos, if you're within a radius of 6 to 8 feet, you're considered to be in the same place. But do you make a scene? Or even without making a scene? Do you tell a person, please leave, that's my space? Or are you mindful of other people's feelings? And the list goes on and on. The Ramban elsewhere says that the Torah can't possibly give specifics of every possible appropriate interaction with our friends and neighbors. In Parshas V'Chanan, using with the verse that has similar phrasing, he gives a bunch of examples. He says there are explicit points. No gossip, no revenge, don't stand idly by as someone is in harm's way, don't curse the deaf, rise before your elders. But it's up to us to connect the dots, to create lines between these, and to create a picture, a pleasant picture, not just of doing the right thing, but of doing things that create a culture of doing the right thing. And the Netziv says this is what the verse is talking about when it says, if you're a person who doesn't hesitate or it doesn't refuse to mix it up with other people over matters that are not life and death, then what you're passing on is a trait of contentiousness to your children. And on the other hand, if you train yourself, maybe not even by nature, but train yourself to be flexible and to be pleasing, and not necessarily to be a doormat, but not to be confrontational whenever the opportunity arises, but rather to be an example of divrei chachamim benachas nishmoim, the words of the of the wise are heard when they're spoken softly. Drasha, darchei noam, the ways of the Torah are pleasant. Hevi makabel is kol adam b'sever panim yafos, and greeting everyone with a pleasant face, a pleasant countenance. There are many different ways in which we can create a culture of being good and straight. And if we do that, it can be a lasting legacy. And this is the message, according to the Netziv, this is the message of our Pasuk. Have a good Shabbos.